Welcome, friends. Welcome to the Merry Corncrakes. It is good to see you again. It has been a little while. I hope that you're doing well and that things have been going well for you in life and that you've been able to read some of the Corncrake magazine in the last little while. This month's edition is fantastic, and this stream is connected to a bit of a theme which is in this month's Corncrake. If I open it up, you let me share this so you can see for yourselves what I'm looking at. This is this month's Corncrake, a beautiful front cover. I think the way the glistens of the bottle is fantastic. And as we go down, you will see in the contents that we have a piece called Hierorot, which is inspired a poem or piece of writing inspired by the Old English epic Beowulf. And then we have Ethelflaed, Lady of the Mercians. Now, Ethelflaed was the daughter of King Alfred, Alfred the Great, who pushed back the Vikings and established the foundations of England, or the English people, unified under him. And Athelflaed married the Lord of the Mercians and was key in maintaining and sustaining and enhancing Alfred's legacy, particularly around Mercia, defending it from Viking attack. And so these two pieces, which I would recommend you go and read when you get the chance, really inspired me or connected with something that I've been thinking about a lot recently, and that is the Norse and Anglo-Saxon warrior culture and the values or ethos of that culture. And there is a lot that could be said to that, right? There's a lot of different aspects that we could explore, but I want to explore those maybe three factors or three aspects which we see in their literature, in poems like Beowulf, in the mythological sagas, such as the Volupsa, or the Nibelungenlied, these sorts of tales, the kind of expression of what the ideal was for these people and who they aspired to be, and how often it did play out in certain moments in history. And so the first kind of aspect I want to focus on is connected to their worldview, their metaphysics of how of what they are confronting. And that is fundamentally a world which is divided, a world in which there is a certain dualistic element. If we compare to Greek mythology, the pantheon of gods is not one united against a pantheon of other gods or against other creatures. Sure, we could look at the battles with the Titans, but after that point, it's a bit more complex. We look at the Trojan War that Homer tells us about in the Iliad. Different gods favor different sides. And when in the world, some monsters are the sons of Poseidon, others belong to Zeus, and so on. The allegiances are not the gods versus the monsters, but rather there's a mixture, and it's inter-Olympian. There's factions, we might say, within the Olympian world. By contrast, the Norse and Germanic mythologies, there's a much clearer division, generally speaking. You have Odin or Wotan or Woden, whatever name we want to give him, who is the king of the gods or the supreme leader of the gods. Thor, Tyr, Freya, etc., who dwell on the mountain at Valhalla, the great hall of Valhalla, and they rule over their domain. Against them are the Jotnar, the giants, who are in a kind of eternal struggle with the gods. And on their side are monsters, like the great wolf Fenrir, or the world serpent Jormundur, and other creatures of the night, dragons like Nidhogg. This is also true in a poem like Beowulf, which is written by a Christian author, at least the version we have. He's probably adapting an older tale. And this dualism is translated into a Christian theological metaphysical framework. So we have men who are allied with God, just like the great heroes of the Norse world are allied with the gods and taken to Valhalla, where they will train in the afterlife to fight with the gods at the great battle, which I'll come to later. And characters like Beowulf or Hrothgar, they are for the world of men and of faith and piety and strength, and trying to defend their halls from a wilderness, a wild, hostile, frozen wilderness, which presses in against the hall, against the place of warmth, against the place of rest and sanctuary. And it is dominated by fiends descended from Satan and from Cain, the murderous brother who killed Abel in cold blood and was sent to wander the earth. Grendel, the troll, we are told, is a son of Cain. He is descended from a murderer who has been cast out by God. And he hates the world of men. He wants nothing more than to destroy the joy and fellowship and laughter that is heard in the hall of Heorot. And so he and other creatures want to devour what is good in the world, devour the world of God and men. So we see this dualistic dimension and this bifurcation of the world, the sanctuaries like the great halls, the places of respite, of fellowship, of strength and protection, and an antagonistic world which wants to devour you, both in its weather and in its monsters and fiends. Now, the thing with this world is that for a time it can be resisted. A character like Beowulf is capable of slaying Grendel the troll and defeating his mother, the witch. The gods are able to stand their ground against the monsters. Thor can overcome the world serpent on several occasions, as can Odin, using his mind, get out of dangerous situations with the gods, with the giants. He's able to outwit them. And this is also true of other situations. We think I was mentioning Alfred the Great at the beginning of this stream as a hero who, while all the other Saxon kingdoms collapse, such as Northumbria, Mercia, before the great horde of the Danes, Alfred, despite the absolute crushing of Wessex, is able to regroup, find, rebuild his strength, and using tactical brilliance and encouraging the morale of the Saxons, he's able to overcome the great heathen horde. So there is an ability to resist. But ultimately, for the Norse and Saxon, defeat is inevitable. Defeat cannot be held away forever. In the Norse situation, in the Norse cycles that we've got, Odin knows he's going to lose against the giants. It is prophesied by the Volupsa, a seeress, that there will be a great apocalypse. First, there will be Fimbulwinter, years of winter devouring the world, causing it to become this cold, harsh, dangerous, and frozen reality. And then following that, there will be a great battle between the gods and men of Valhalla, who are ready to stand their ground, and the monsters of the deep rising up to take it on. Odin will be killed by the wolf Fenrir. Thor will kill the world serpent, but in so doing be poisoned and die. Tyr and others will be slain, and Surtur, the fire giant, will devour Valhalla in flame. The world will then sink into the ocean, and the old world as we know it will be gone. This is inevitable. The prophecy has been written. It cannot be undone. It is fated to be. And we know this insofar as at least in another of the stories. I forget its name, but it's part of the Norse mythic saga, mythic cycles belonging to the same group of stories as the Volupsa, or the Volupso. He is in a riddle match with the King of the Giants, and he will only be able to keep his life if he wins this riddle match. One of the rules of the riddles in the game and in Norse culture is you can't give a riddle that you know the answer is false. You have to give a correct answer. And if you give a correct answer which is true, then you will win the game or survive, right? So he asks a question, and also you can only ask a question you know the answer to. Now, Odin asks the King of the Giants what's going to happen at the end of the world. King of the Giants, if I remember correctly, doesn't know. Odin gives the answer, and he prophesies his own destruction. The King of the Giants loses the contest and is himself killed, right? Because he lost. Odin can only win though if he A, knows the answer, and B, his answer is true. So the very fact that he wins this contest on the basis that he knows he's going to be defeated at the end of the world is a pretty strong statement of the fact that he knows the truth. He knows that he is fated to die at Ragnarok. Nonetheless, and I should say this is a theme beyond just the Norse sagas. There are many instances where we have heroes, Saxon heroes, Norse heroes, who are confronted with situations where the odds are not good. In fact, it is inevitable that they will be defeated, that they are against a foe who's much stronger or more numerous and will overwhelm them. The classic case is the Battle of Malden, where a Viking force overwhelmed a Saxon one, and the bodyguard of Beardnoth, the general, stood their ground. Even when he died, they fought on to the end. Even though they knew they were going to die, they made a last stand. They were aware that there was no way they could win this situation. To an extent, Beowulf also faces this. When he fights the dragon later in the poem to defend his people, he is an old man, and he's going up against a dragon in its prime, and in its destructive awesomeness. There's a sense in which, although he goes alone, he's going into a situation which he cannot truly win. And we've been told earlier in the poem that he meets a tragic end. So we know that this is fated to be. Nonetheless, and we've already heard a clue of this, a key value for the Saxon and the Norseman is northern heroic courage. The will to stand your ground, to resist on, even though you are going to lose the battle. You do not flinch, you do not cower, you do not show fear. You stay and you fight, and you show all the more courage and strength as you are dragged down. We see this with Ragnarok, the last battle for the Norse. Odin does not run, and he does not resign himself to accepting his fate. No, he resists and he fights. He makes sure that the monsters, they have to do their best before they can kill him. Thor doesn't give up. He slays the world serpent. If he's going down, so is the world serpent. These gods are not going down without a fight, even though they know they're going to lose. And it is that spirit, that defiance, which sums up a big part of their ethos. There's nothing worse than being a coward and retreating in the face of a more powerful enemy. And as I said, this was the case at the Battle of Malden. After their general had been slain, the men who supported him carried on the fight. And one of them, an old Huskarl, gave one of the most iconic speeches. It's been called the Creed of the Anglo-Saxons. Let me see if I can find it, because it's worth saying the quote. Thought shall be harder, heart the keener, courage the greater, as our might lessens. This is a beautiful line from 991 AD when the Battle of Maldon took place, and it very much sums up the spirit of those men who stood their ground. And it defines a big trait within Anglo culture more broadly. Sure, others have had last stands, but it does seem that there is a romance or a praise for such individuals in our culture. I think of the Battle of Rorke's Drift, when a small group of 100 to 200 British soldiers in the Empire were surrounded at a small outpost by 4,000 Zulus, and nonetheless, rather than running away, stood their ground and fought, and actually pushed back the Zulus with that number. There are plenty of examples we could think of. That undeniable will, resolute to the end, because even though the body can be broken and overpowered, such shows that the mind and heart and spirit has not been conquered, that you remained strong and true even to the end. That's particularly praiseworthy in a man like the Huskarl, who is demonstrating his loyalty to his lord and to his people, that he will die protecting them, to defend them. He's not just fighting for his own personal glory, it's out of duty and obligation, which brings him great honor, that he has a task he's been given, and he's not going to abandon this. Nothing will make him abandon this. I guess maybe another version of this is the ancient story of the Roman soldier who, when Pompeii was going to be washed away by the lava flows of Mount Etna, when it erupted, everybody else was running. The story has it that this Roman guard stood by his post, even as the lava flows came. He would not move for the lava. He would not run away. He would not do anything else, because he had a duty, an obligation, and he was obedient to it and fulfilled it to the end. Because to break it would to be break a bond, a promise, an oath, to betray what he had been called to do, to betray himself and his people. That's an extreme version of it, but it's that spirit that we're seeing in the Anglo-Saxons and in the Viking, in the Norsemen. It's partly what made them so ferocious and so difficult to defeat. They weren't going to run away so easily, and I think that gave testament to why they were, certainly the Vikings were able to establish themselves around Europe during their raids and so on. They were very effective because, in part, their will was stronger than their opponents. I'm trying to think whether there's anything else I should say on this before we move on to the next aspect, which is connected, but it's slightly different. I think that I guess the real kind of thrust of this idea could lead to potentially bad consequences or strange aspects to it, and we'll come on to those, but it also could have a somewhat humorous element. certainly in Norse literature, I've not found it so much in Saxon. There is this there is this tale in, I think it's in the Nibelungen Lied, and I can't remember the characters' names, I'm afraid. And you also find it actually in various forms in other cultures. I think, yeah, I'll tell the Scottish version of this tale. In some ways, it's a little bit more fun. But essentially, there was the two Picts. Well, there was the Pictish tribe, and they were not human, as it were. They were shorter, but much stronger, like 4 times the strength of an ordinary man. These are clearly based on the dwarves or dark elves of Norse legend, and they were defeated by the King of the Scots, and he wiped out most of them and captured 2 of these Picts or Pecks, a father and a son. Now the Picts used to brew a special ale made from heather, which is a purple flower which flourishes in Scotland. You'll often see it in the Highlands. It's very pretty on the hill, decorating it with a royal robe, as it were. And they knew the secret to this heather ale. And so the King of the Scots says, tell me what this heather ale is, otherwise I'm going to torture you, and so on. The father of the pig says, okay, I will tell you if you kill my son. I want him dead. He has, betrayed his inheritance. He is not worthy of my name. I'd rather he be dead, and then I will tell you. So the King of the Scots kills the younger Pict, and then the father turns around and says, you fools, I knew my son would break. He would reveal the secret. So rather than him doing that and betraying the last thing of our people to you, our conquerors, I had you kill him. And so now the secret will die with him, because I will never tell you. It's kind of dark and pretty awful when you think about it, like he has his son killed. But this is, again, a version of Northern heroic courage. Rather than give in and surrender, even though he cannot fight them physically anymore, he can, through his wit, through his will, overcome his enemy, resist them to the end, not give them what they want. That is part of the spirit here. So it's a kind of stubbornness. There's a noble aspect to it, right? It's not just stubborn for stubborn's sake or personal ego. It's bigger than that. It's because in that case, if we think about it, it's actually the Pict is holding on to the last remnant of his home. And by home, I don't just mean a house or a place to live. Certainly, we have many houses in Britain, but we have few homes, because a home is, well, certainly in an English or British tradition, and maybe it was there in the Norse as well, but certainly in this country, it's a very particular concept, or feeling, I should say, rather than concept. It's your particular, it's your family, it's your friends, it's your local community, it's the house and the architecture of the house. So it's the red door and your bedroom, it's your dining table, it's the food you eat with your family, it's the games you play with them, it's the landscape that you walk in and that your house hopefully talks to and it complements. It's the things you do as a larger group of people together, the customs, the rituals, the conventions you follow. These are, it's a history. It's a past which lives in you, and you share it with your ancestors, with your kin and your descendants. It's something that belongs to us. So it's very particular. You can't define it almost. It's just those things which are markers of who you are and and what you belong to. And I think that the something like Heather Ale belonged to the Picts. It's something that they shared. It was more than just a nice alcohol. It was a feature of their home life, which had been robbed from them, which had been taken from them, which had been destroyed. But rather than give up the last remnant and kind of betray it, to pass it away for just one's life and livelihood, the pig said, "No, you're not taking my home from me. You can destroy it, but you're not going to abuse and use it. It's going to keep its dignity, even though I will die with it. It will die in me and with me. You will not rob it from me." So I think that's a factor in this. That's a factor in this. So I see Northern Courage as not just a brute defiance, although that's there. It's very much rooted in the people, in the land, in the home that they are fighting for. And because in all of these cases, home is a big part of it. We look at somewhere like Beowulf. What is he fighting Grendel over? It's not just although the tale tells us Beowulf wants glory. Ultimately, what Grendel has done is he has invaded the home of the Danes. He has attacked and killed men within their home. He has destroyed the sanctity, the safety, the joy of the home, made it a dangerous place filled with grief and horror and blood. And Beowulf, by killing Grendel, restores the home. And again, when the dragon attacks the Geats, they're the home of Beowulf, he rides out to meet it, and he defends his home against the dragon. So with Odin, where's the battle taking place? It's at Valhalla, the home of the gods, the home of the Heinherjar, the great heroes of men. So I think when we think about these stories, understanding that Northern heroic courage is very much rooted in a people and their landscape and their architecture and their customs and conventions, and they are fighting for their right to maintain those things. That gives a new edge to that defiance, because it's a defiance not just for the individual and not for a community in the abstract or a land in an abstract modern nationhood way. It's a deep affectionate bond for themselves and for sharing with others their family and their home, even if that means they have to die to let others do so. The let us kind of move on to then maybe the second feature of of this this Norse and Saxon literature. I was talking about Northern heroic courage at some length, but a part of this, if we think of part of the key of it, is not being a coward, not being afraid to face your foe and to be overwhelmed and to be overpowered physically, not being afraid of that, but fighting on nonetheless. Another aspect of this is fairness or fair play. There's a strong emphasis on winning in the right way and acknowledging that your opponent has a certain dignity too, and recognizing that in battle. One example of this comes from Beowulf. When Beowulf is preparing to take on Grendel, this huge troll who has killed many men and eaten them, men who are warriors, I should say, as well. Right? This isn't just civilians. We're talking about people who are proficient at combat and have just been totally destroyed by Grendel. Beowulf says, if I used a blade, I would easily kill Grendel. So I'm not going to do that. I am not going to fight him with a blade because it would be unfair to him. I am going to use the same weapons that he has, my bare hands. And then it is up to God whether I win or lose, whether I succeed or whether I die. Now, on the surface, this seems very imprudent. This is not the practical thing to do. Actually, if you really want to deal with the threat and defend your home, surely you should use every advantage you've got to take on this man-eating troll who hates humanity. It's not just going to stop with you and your people. It affects everybody and everybody's home. It's not factional. It's just humanity versus the monsters. I think, though, that for Beowulf, this would be deeply dishonorable to conquer a foe, or to fight a foe in a way that makes them less with an unfair advantage, with an advantage that you could do without, that they could not gain for themselves. This is almost deceptive and sneaky, and something that someone who's fearful would do. The brave man, the courageous man, doesn't need the extra advantage because he trusts in himself and he recognizes that this battle ultimately isn't down to him. Whether we call it the weird, as in fate, or providence, there was a strong commitment to the idea that the result of any conflict isn't within our power. It isn't something that we have definite control over. Ultimately, it's up to God, fate, or the gods, or some combination of all of these things. And in a way, we see this in the Norse tradition with Ragnarok. Odin knows he's going to lose this battle. It has been fated. The Norns have spoken, the prophets have spoken. He himself has come to realize this truth. He knows he's going to lose. So it's not really down to how well he fights, whether he's going to survive Ragnarok or not. He's going to die anyway. It's out of his hands. But in that respect, then there's a kind of freedom. Oh, it's not down to me anymore. So even if I have this extra advantage, it's kind of pointless because I'll die if I'm appointed to die at this point. And this then gets kind of passed down from Odin to the men he chooses to join him in Valhalla. The way that they are appointed is Odin will pick the great heroes of the Norsemen, of the Vikings. And when he does so, he will send a Valkyrie. And when the Valkyrie appears to you, only to you, because often they cannot be seen by others, that is a portent that you are going to die. These men then die in battle and are taken to Valhalla in the afterlife. That's how they get there. So they have to die in battle. So it's quite interesting because these men who are great warriors, the fact that they die is outside of their control. It's been ordained by Odin. They had no choice in the matter. And that's true of all combats then, for the Norsemen, or in the case of Beowulf or the Christian Saxon, it's God who's ordained whether you live or die. Much better then to fight a fair fight than one in which you had the greatest advantage, because ultimately, even if you have the greatest advantage, you may die. So at least fight with honor. At least fight with honor. It's quite hard to articulate, but I feel there is a liberty in that when you know that you are not. You can do your best, and it still might not be enough. Well, then you don't have to worry about winning. What you have to worry about is doing the right thing or fighting in the right way. Perhaps the best story of this, again, I can't remember the names. It's too late at night. But there is a story, a Norse story of a man who is basically hired to kill a farmer who seems to have been causing trouble. At least that's what the locals say. And this warrior goes out to fight this farmer. And so they commit to a duel. And the farmer is no slouch. He is fighting back, and he is causing trouble for his opponent. They fight for a few hours, and eventually the warrior says, "Oh, I need a drink." The opponent says, "Okay, go ahead." And while his opponent takes a drink, the farmer lets him do so. He doesn't attack him or anything. Later, I think, if I remember correctly, the warrior needs to tie up his shoelace. Again, the farmer, rather than taking advantage of this, steps back, gives him space, lets him do so. Finally, the warrior's blade breaks, and rather than take advantage, the farmer says, "No, we are gonna, I'm gonna beat you fair and square. It's not gonna come down to whether your blade has been broken and mine not." So he gives him his own blade and finds a worse one to fight with. And so the farmer puts himself at a disadvantage to allow the warrior to have a fair shot at it. Ultimately, the two of them fighting themselves to a standstill decide, actually, we're not enemies. You're a good guy. You are truly a great man, given your nobility and your warrior prowess. So actually, let's go and kill all the people that wanted you dead, Mr. Farmer. So it's quite a good ending, and that seems to be a pattern that's repeated. So in Beowulf, the decision to fight fairly with Grendel pays great dividends, because we discover later in the story that Grendel's skin is immune to the blade. It is too tough for blades to break it, to pierce it. So if Beowulf had relied on a sword, he would have actually lost the battle. By using his great strength and breaking off Grendel's arm, wrenching it off with his bare claw grip, Beowulf is rewarded for fighting without a weapon. So we see this kind of dynamic within Norse and Saxon literature, the idea of a fair fight. And I think this definitely gets carried forward into chivalry and the chivalric values of ensuring that your opponent is treated with respect and fighting on equal terms, and allowing maybe a combination of skill and so on, and prowess rather than accident to decide the day. But this could also have a bad side to it. You see, Northern heroic courage is obviously something which is highly prized, right? Within Saxon culture, it's the highest value, and so to be identified with that virtue would bring great glory. But then, as often the case, men's desires are not wholly pure, and so, okay, we may want to be noble and defend our land to the bitter end, but there's also a sense of, I want some glory to go with this. I want to be renowned for my deeds, and even if I have to die, I'm going to go down in such a way that I will be remembered by my descendants forevermore. And so this desire for glory can lead sometimes to rash decisions which are not prudent. So let's return to the Battle of Maldon in 991 AD. It takes place by the River Blackwater in Essex, and the Vikings are sailing down this river. The Saxons are arrayed on the shoreline, and it is quite clear that if the Vikings try to land, they're going to get cut down as they get off their boats. The Vikings send an emissary, and they say to Beardnoth, "Let us land. Let us fight you on equal terms. Then we will have a proper battle." Beardnoth, the Earl Beardnoth, who's leading the Saxons, agrees. And the poet says something interesting here. He uses the term othermode or ethermode, which means vanity or pride. It was this which moved Beardnoth to allow the Vikings to land. So the poet's a little bit critical here of his motivations. If he was truly thinking about what was best for his country, he wouldn't have let them land. By doing so, he paved the way for the Vikings winning the battle, because they were a stronger force. They overwhelmed, they killed him, his guard were left fighting, and they died too. Now, we could defend the Earl and say, well, he's actually trying to live up to the ideal of fairness within Saxon culture. That if he hadn't accepted this deal, would he have been judged a coward or somebody who's dishonorable for not taking on his opponent in a fair context? Perhaps. But the question then is that virtue wholly good? And I think it raises a good question about that. And I wonder if it's a problem with the Viking and Saxon worldview when taken uncritically. It's fine in a one-on-one duel, right? To a certain extent, where you are just responsible for yourself. So the farmer versus the warrior. But when you're responsible for protecting other people, sure, you can still display northern heroic courage, but is pursuing fairness the correct way? Is there a limit to it? Perhaps. So we've had northern heroic courage, we've had fairness. The final aspect I want to emphasize today is loss or lament. As I've indicated, all of these stories end ultimately in defeat for the protagonist. Odin and Thor are slain. Beowulf is killed. The men who fight at the Battle of Maldon are butchered by the Vikings. There is a strong sense in Saxon literature and Norse literature that the Golden Age has been torn down, and it was inevitable that time, suffering, and death would overcome it. Now we live in a world filled with ruins, of ashes, of the echoes of once laughing in the feast hall, drinking mead together. Probably, arguably, the most famous poem of this period, apart from Beowulf, is The Wanderer. And this poem really sums up this atmosphere of elegy for the Anglo-Saxon, that we live in a post-Great Age that haunts us, that we can still remember to a certain degree, but it is now gone, and there's no way we can recover it. We are doomed. Those of us left are doomed to wander the frozen wastes with no hope of finding a home again. The home has been destroyed. Let me read some of this cheery poem to you tonight, so you can get a sense of it. As I bring it up, I think it's worth saying as well that the Anglo-Saxons, many of them saw the remnants of a past great civilization in Britain. They saw Roman fortifications, which they often described as being built by giants. These stone walls were beyond Anglo-Saxon technology and skill. They didn't know how to build in that way, not until much later. And so often, such as in Chester, where Athelflaed was based for a long time, they used the Roman walls as fortifications because they were stronger than what they could build themselves. There was a sense then that they were living amidst the remnants of a once great civilization that was superior in certain ways to their own. I don't mean necessarily in the values or in the people, but just in what they could achieve, in the great works that they could complete. That time was gone now, and nobody seemed to have that knowledge anymore. It was more than just a people or a culture. It was a special knowledge and skill that had been lost and couldn't be recovered. Imagine living in a world where things have been forgotten and you live in this post-glory age. I think a lot of post-apocalyptic literature and media gives us that sense. When I watch something like the Walking Dead, for example, which is set in a zombie apocalypse, much of what we take for granted just disappears. There's no clear source of electricity, and people have to generate it themselves. There's no systems of buying and selling as we know it. Science has pretty much disappeared. places of learning are gone. And it seems really difficult to bring back a lot of that knowledge, especially for people from cities who don't know how to grow their own food or to supply energy to themselves. It seems like a very primitive life is all that remains. So let me read a little bit of The Wanderer for you, because I think it definitely fits into that genre. How often the lone dweller anticipates some sign. This measure is mercy. Must always must. Mind caring along the ocean's windings, stirring rime-chill seas, hands as oars, many long whiles treading the tracks of exile, the way of the world an open book always. So spoke the earth-stepper, a memorial of misery, slaughter of the wrathful, crumbling of kinsmen. Often, every daybreak, alone I must bewail my cares. There's now no one living to whom I dare mumble my mind's understanding. I know as truth that it seems suitable for anyone to bind fast their spirit's closet, hold on to the hoards, think whatever. Can a weary mind weather shit's storm? I think not. Can a roiling heart set itself free? I don't think so. So often those hustling for the win must clamp down grim mindings in their coffer, just as I ought fetter my inborn conceit, often wounded, wanting where I know kindred pulled away. How many winters now? I shrouded my giver in dark earth, and wended away worrisome, weather watching the wrathful waves, all wretched, seeking a centre, far or near, where they might be found, in some mead hall, who knows of my kind, willing to adopt a friendliness with me, though they be joyful enough. And so on, so on. There's that famous line which Tolkien kind of takes from this. He kind of rephrases it. Where has the horse gone? Where are my kindred? Where is the giver of treasure? Where are the benches to bear us? Joys of the hall to bring us together? No more the bright goblet. All gone, the mailed warrior. Lost for good, the pride of princes. It is a world of loss and lament, an age where what was once good has been taken and despoiled. The home has been destroyed. What is loved, where we find belonging is gone, and you're just left in exile. That is a key theme in Anglo-Saxon literature and must speak to their deep sense of but I think it speaks to a deep sense in two sense of rootlessness. Remember, the Anglo-Saxons were descended from tribes who were driven from their homelands by the Huns, and so sought new pastures to dwell in. Other tribes went into France or into Western Germany, as they are today. Others travelled across the sea to Britain and settled there. This, though they were there for hundreds of years, their history was one of flight, of destruction, of fleeing and finding a new home. Their time in England was never one where they could trace themselves back to the very beginnings of the place. Others could do that much more effectively. The Britons, Saxons couldn't do that. They brought this with them, this flight from horror and terror. And so it remained with them deep within their souls and remains with us, I think, to a certain degree. But also in their own time, the rise of Saxon kings in the 500s and 600s was brought about in part by a severe famine which struck when a volcano in Iceland erupted and covered Europe in ash and blocked out the skies and caused a kind of mini ice age. This then became a brutal time where warlords rose up who were able to control and provide food sources and provide protection for others in a very chaotic and dangerous and deadly world. This formation led to mass conflict, and the rise of kingdoms led to war between them. And so often the mead halls were getting destroyed. The time of plenty was gone. The time of safety was overturned, and very many of the kings, their dynasties did not last in power. I can think of several who would rise very, very quickly, such as King Oswald, who overthrew the Mercian domination of Northumberland, but was himself killed in later battle by an Anglo-Saxon king. So this sense of the fleetingness of the good times, that they are here for a moment and then the rest is misery, it corresponds to the experience of the Anglo-Saxons in a very dark world. And while I don't think we should denounce them as living in a dark age compared to the Enlightenment, I've never thought that. It was a hard time. It was a hard time. That's maybe an understatement, and it's kind of obvious, but it's worth saying. This wasn't a time of civilization as we know it, where you can indulge in luxury and pleasure. This was a brutal world where those who were not strong, had to suffer under the yoke of others. This was a world in which elite men fought to the death to conquer each other and to secure their homes. This was a world in which the mind and body were tested to the absolute limit by nature and by other men. They certainly face monsters. This is a world in which the fellowship can only last for a time before it is broken in battle in one way or another. And that is the setting in which Northern heroic courage and fairness are found. It's a wild west. It's an apocalypse where, okay, everything else has been torn down, but we're going to fight to the death, fairly, man on man. That's all that matters now. That's all that counts. I think that's a fair crack at the subject. So we've looked at Northern courage, we've looked at fairness, and we've looked at loss. There may be other values or aspects of Anglo-Saxon literature, but I think these at least are at the core. If there are other core values, please let me know. I'd be very interested to hear your takes. But we've got a few minutes now for questions or comments. As you can see, some good friends are in the chat, which is nice. So yeah, if you've got anything you want to add or say, now's your moment. I'll just reiterate the call to read the Corncrake. You can go to the Corncrake Mag or corncrakemag.com. Let me type that in the chat. And you can access this month's edition of the Corncrake. It's really good, and as I said, there are two Anglo-Saxon related aspects to this month's Corncrake, and that's partly what inspired me to talk about this topic. Other things have also been going in and inspiring me. It never goes far from my mind. It's quite important, and I think it's partly why. Here's maybe a flip side while we wait and see if anyone's got anything they want to say. The Saxon and the Englishman, in a lot of their writing, they have a real vivacity for the good, simple pleasures of material life. The ale in the mead cup, the glint of golden treasure, the beautiful colours of a tapestry, the wonder and elegance dance of a bird's song. the flight of a bird, the mountain daisy. These are not grand and epic. These are not things of, that we think of as of ultimate significance. But in a world where A, they belong to our home, but B, you're in a war-torn world which is one of loss and ultimate defeat. When you don't take these things for granted, when you know they're going to go away at one point, you treasure them more because you know how good they are and that you're not going to have them forever. So you might as well enjoy them now. There's a real attentiveness to that in certainly in something like Beowulf. Later poems, medieval poems, which I think, they had many of the same experiences, even though they had a more developed social and political and religious structures, and to some extent a more settled way of life, although it was often disrupted by war and plague and so on at certain points. Take something like Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. I don't know if you've ever read this poem. It's one of the greats of English literature, and maybe one day I'll stream on it, because I've actually always wanted to do a stream on it, but I've never felt worthy of that poem, silly as it might sound, because I'm certainly not worthy of Beowulf, but I guess I've done a bit more reading of Beowulf and I understand it more, whereas Sir Gawain, it's kind of entering into a strange wood that I recognize things and I see things and I love them, but I do not know them deeply yet. And part of me feels I should do so before I talk about this wonderful poem that many people haven't heard about. But there is this wonderful passage in Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. And actually, I'm going to read it because I think it's just absolutely fantastic. It really is stirring. Let me see if I can find it. I might have it. I actually have a copy of this book, so I'm going to have a look for it now, and I will be back in a moment. Alas, I could not find it, but I will use this online. I will find an online version because really it's worthwhile. And if I can use an excuse to read more of this great work, written around the same time as Chaucer, though not by him, probably by somebody else connected to the royal court. I found an old English version. I don't think I can read that, I'm afraid. Let's see. Is there any version, please? Let's see. For a bit of context, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight begins in Arthur's court, and they are feasting away. They're having a great time, maybe a little self-indulgent, but they are then confronted by a man who rides into court. He is a green knight, green from head to foot, and he enters the court and lays out a challenge to anyone in there. He says, "Okay, I will let you cut off my head, but in exchange, you must be willing to let me have a strike at yours." Sorry, he doesn't say cut off my head. He says you can lay a strike on me, but I will be allowed to lay a strike on you. Now, everybody's kind of aghast at this. This kind of monstrous man walks in and then challenges, and then he makes fun of them because they're reticent. He questions their courage and nobility. He questions Arthur, and Arthur isn't made to look so great in this story. Gawain, who's the greatest of knights, or the great, though he be the youngest, he stands up and he says, I will do it. And so he cuts off. He gets up and he cuts off the Green Knight's head, the Green Man's head, and the Green Knight picks it up and says, "Okay, in 1 year's time, I will lay my strike on you, and you will have to go to a certain place." This obviously is terrifying and quite spooky and scary, but the Green Knight, he has laid out his command, and so so Gawain is then having to go off on his quest after a year to find the Green Knight at the Green Chapel. So he this kind of comes from that passage. The beginning of adventures had Arthur at the new year, for he yearned to hear gallant tales, though his words were few when he sat at the feast. But now had they stern work on hand. Gawain was glad to begin the jest in the hall, but ye need have no marvel in the end be heavy. For though a man be merry in mind when he was well drunk, yet a year runs full swiftly, and the beginning but rarely matches the end. Let's just for a moment, let's think about that theme of loss again. He's enjoyed his time in the hall. It's been merriful, but actually it's now coming to an end, and it looks like it's going to be a brutal one. For Yule was now overpast, and the year after, each season in its turn following the other. For after Christmas comes crabbed Lent, that will have fish for flesh and simple cheer. But then the weather of the world chides with winter. The cold withdraws itself, the clouds uplift, and the rain falls in warm showers on the fair plains. Then the flowers come forth, meadows and grove are clad in green. The birds make ready to build, and sing sweetly for solace of the soft summer that follows thereafter. The blossoms bud and blow in the hedgerows rich and rank, and noble notes enough are heard in the fair woods. After the season of summer, with the soft winds when zephyr breathes lightly on seeds and herbs, joyous indeed is the growth that waxes thereout, when the dew drips from the leaves beneath the blissful glance of the bright sun. But then comes harvest and hardens the grain, warning it to wax ripe ere the winter. The drought drives the dust on high, flying over the face of the land. The angry wind of the welkin wrestles with the sun. The leaves fall from the trees and light upon the ground, and all brown are the groves that but now were green, and ripe is the fruit that once was flower. So the year passes into many yesterdays, and winter comes again, as it needs no sage to tell. I just think that's a beautiful passage. And one of the lines that isn't here, but it's said in the translation I have, is spring is when summer makes war on winter. I think that's a stunning line filled with energy and vitalism, and a really powerful way of seeing spring as a time of showers and sunshine mixed together and growth coming from it. It's a time of bursting forth. And you can see from the language used in this passage, just to describe the seasons, he doesn't do it in abstract ways. He doesn't kind of draw on bigger patterns. He gives very specific examples that we can feel, that we've seen, that we know in our local area, certainly in Britain. It's when the grain hardens, or when the birds make ready to build their nest and sing. This is a very evocative way, and clearly this man loves these things. He relishes them. He enjoys them. He takes great delight in noticing them and observing them and thinking, these are wonderful. These are wonderful. Even the inconvenient rain, even the hardening of the grain, even the coming of winter. There's a beauty in it, and it's worth cherishing. It isn't something to see as an inconvenience and wishing only for summer or for whatever season we prefer. There is a magnificence in this cycle, and it's not just in the cycle as a large thing, as a weather pattern, but as it brings individual lives and stories to be. Truly a great poem, and I think that in Beowulf, maybe in a tinged way, maybe in a more melancholic way. Certainly, the poem is certainly more of an elegy, but still in the mead hall, there's a real fervor for the materiality of it, and the the things of touch and sight and sound and smell and taste are worthy of comment. The senses are not something to pass over, but also it's not just staying there. It's within a transcendent context, a context in which there's a world of fate and providence and supernatural beings. There is a tender, intimate, graceful majesty in these small things. And so holding on to them and loving them is fully worthwhile. Anyway, that is the sum of my talk tonight. I hope that you've enjoyed it, and we got another aspect out there actually that I truly appreciated. I hope that you found it stimulating and something to think about. Maybe as a kind of final point is that I've been talking about this in terms of Anglo-Saxon culture, Anglo-Saxon literature, and Norse as well. But it's my firm belief that actually these things are deep within us. I was talking about home being something which is the past within us, that we carry with us, and that lives in us. And we have all faced the challenges of living in the modern world with technology, with being uprooted from our ancestral homes, moving around, moving jobs, the very nature of our work, our fragmented societies. The phrase I used earlier is we've got many houses but few homes. But nonetheless, deep within the English is that Anglo-Saxon at its very origin point, and the stories and the values and the ideas and the virtues that they prided themselves on, which they built their cultures around, which they held dear, they reside in us. They are there in us. All of these things, and as I hope I've shown in a small way, with something like Sir Gawain in the Green Knight, or when I talked about Rorke's Drift, or I could have given other examples, many of these traits are developed or worked out or find new form throughout English history or British history. And so I truly believe that these things are not dead, and they are not something belonging to an alien people, although they would seem strange to us in many ways and we to them. But they are there, and they are something that I think many of us are stirred by and moved by and feel a deep connection to. Some kind of primordial, I don't know about memory, but something, a sentiment that belongs in us that wants to kind of pour forth like a fountain or a flood. It's there, and it can be awoken. It can be we can become more conscious of it through certain things. We can reacquaint ourselves with it. And so I would encourage you to maybe think about that in your own lives. If you're an Anglo or from somewhere connected to England or Britain, or maybe more universally to a certain extent, but certainly in that case, think about it. See, is it there? Is it deep down there? Is there ways I could draw it out? Is there things I could harness from it while living in the modern world? And then also, if you're reading or writing stories, think about how maybe this could be worked in to your stories today. Think about how these aspects of the Anglo-Saxon literature can be celebrated once more. On that note, I'm going to leave you tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your time and your attention and your engagement. And if you would like to leave any comments, you're more than welcome to. I would love to hear what you have to say. If you could please have a look at the corncrakemag.com and look at the magazine and have a read. Just try it out. Maybe read the stuff on the Anglo-Saxons that's in there. maybe try out other stuff, I would be very grateful. I would be personally grateful. And I hope that you enjoy it so much that it moves beyond just doing it for me, but that you actually want to do it for yourself. Nonetheless, have a good evening, everybody. God bless you. And may whatever you do it with northern courage, with fairness, and with a cherishing of the good things in life. Good night, everyone. Bye for now.